Howdy ladies and gents, my name is Thom Gibson, and in this video we are going to be looking at how to deal with student pushback. The pushback that I'm really going to be talking about though is when you invite feedback from the students and it is negative feedback. I tried this for the first time when I taught 5th grade. I was like, well, this lesson kind of went okay, it wasn't the best. What would you guys have done differently, or what would you have wanted to do for this lesson instead? And the first time they did it, like, well, maybe we could have gone outside and did it this one way to figure out how to do this thing, or made a project instead of doing the worksheets. And in my mind I was just kind of like, oh, what do you know, you're just a kid, I'm the one that's a teacher, that's why we didn't do it your way, because it wouldn't have worked and you wouldn't have learned anything. And I took it personally because I was like, well, they're critiquing the way that I did this and questioning my decisions, and it doesn't make me feel great, and they're kids and I'm the teacher, and I know better than them of what's actually going to work. My current school has a lot more of a culture of debrief, where we actually spend the last 3 to 5 minutes of every class debriefing the students on the class. Debrief can take a lot of different forms, from what did you like about class, what did you not really like, what would you have changed if you were running class today, do you think we spent too much time on certain things, do you think we spent not enough time, were these questions more difficult than you anticipated, were these questions not really as challenging as you would like. I've done some where it's a scale of fist to 5, fist being I'm really kind of unsure about this concept that we're learning, 5 being I feel really confident right now and feel I have a thorough understanding so I can kind of assess. You're generally just trying to get feedback from the students about class that day. Something that helps in this is letting students know throughout the class why you're doing things the way that you're doing them. Outside of the learning objective, but here's your learning objective. The reason we're going over these types of problems is because it's going to help you understand and meet that learning objective in this way. The more students know why, the more likely they're going to be to go along with it and be like, oh, okay, I thought we were just doing this arbitrarily, but my teacher actually explained that the reason is this. There's more purpose in it. But even with that, there will be students that tell you like, oh, I really think we should have done this instead, or I felt like this part was really unclear. And sometimes they don't even mean to make it sound rude, but it will kind of come off as rude sounding where they're criticizing your teaching. One of my former colleagues that had a lot more experience at that school in the culture of debrief said that whenever students gave debrief, instead of defending himself in that moment and saying, well, I did it because of this, in that moment when they asked for debrief, he would always just say, thank you, which kind of gives the students a little bit more, it makes them a little bit more comfortable to share if they have a constructive criticism of the class. So as tempting as it has been in the past to defend myself during those last few minutes of class when doing debrief, I try to save that for the beginning of the lesson or even during the lesson and tell them why. But if they're giving me feedback that I want to defend during those debrief times at the end of class, I just say, thank you for sharing that. Something that is nice though is sometimes a student will be like, I don't feel you really explained this portion of the assignment. I was really confused on it. And then another student will chime in and be like, what are you talking about? He talked about it for like 5 minutes before we went over it and then asked if there was any questions. And so they will kind of monitor each other if someone's just saying things that are not even true, or they are completely either in their own minds or just not mentally present in those moments. And so whenever you do get pushback, whenever you do get feedback from students, you have 2 options. You can change what you're doing in response to that feedback, or you can decide, I'm not going to change. I've done both in my years in my current school. A couple instances where I actually changed the way that I was doing the things in the class based on the feedback. One of the times in pre-algebra, we were doing some equations and I was having them work problems out by hand instead of using a calculator. And then a student said, these kind of problems aren't really assessing us on like our ability to do multiplication and division. You're really assessing us on knowing if we know how to set up these equations and solve them. So could we use a calculator on this? And I was like, well, she's got a point. Like, that's not really the learning objective. Pre-algebra really is a good time to actually start learning how to use a calculator. So I'm like, you know what? You're right. Let's go ahead and use calculators for the rest of this unit. And in an effort to not waste time, a lot of times if we had 15 or 20 minutes left of class, these are hour-and-a-half long classes. Sometimes I'll go ahead and start the next lesson for the next day, and then we'll stop, and then we'll just pick it up where we left off the next time we have class. Multiple times, students have told me when we only have 15 minutes left of class and we actually start getting some momentum and start doing some of the first problems together, and then we have to stop, I kind of lose my train of thought, and then when I come back the next day, I don't really remember where I was at mentally when I was working on that problem, and I can't engage in the conversation or the discussion nearly as much as if I were talking about it immediately after I did it. I thought that was a valid criticism, and so I was like, okay, well, if we ever have 15 or 20 minutes left of class, I will find some other maybe review activities or review questions to do, but I won't start the next lesson because it's just much easier to keep the flow flow going by just saving it all for the next class. But just because they give you feedback does not mean you have to change what you are doing. Listen to the feedback and see if it is valid feedback. And if it's not, continue doing what you're doing. Just because students don't like doing something doesn't mean that's a reason to stop doing something. In math, one of the biggest things that they don't like to do is create visual models of what they are doing. We do this with one-step equations where you kind of create a scale and then you show what's actually happening to the scale to show balance. And I make them draw it out because they really struggle later on when we're working with numbers with decimals and with fractions, and they kind of forget this idea that the equation is balanced, and this visual model is to help them see that. And it takes a different kind of understanding to actually draw the visual model. So some students will get it on paper and writing the algorithm, but they don't get the visual model. And I would challenge them to say, I don't think you fully understand this if you can't represent it in multiple ways. I don't make them do the visual models the entire time, but when we're first learning that lesson, I want them to draw it out. And so year after year after year, students say, I don't really like it, it doesn't really help me. I get that. I'm still gonna make you draw it because I think it's gonna be beneficial for you in the long run and your conceptual understanding of this type of mathematics. Some students give me feedback and say they wish they could listen to music during independent work time. They say it helps them focus when they're working on their math. And I say, the research says that it doesn't, unless you're listening to like background music that doesn't really have any lyrics or anything like that. But I don't wanna monitor what you're listening to and be like, are you listening to a pop song or are you listening to background music? So I say no music at all. So with a lot of those times where I kind of keep getting the same feedback, but I'm kind of standing my ground, I will explain to kids why I'm doing what I'm doing. I try not to do it in that last 5 minutes during the debrief, but maybe when at the beginning of class next time, I'll say, had several students in my classes give me feedback that they didn't like this. Here is why I'm continuing to do this. At least they know why, even if they disagree with you. And they're more willing to accept that than just saying, well, this is the way we're gonna do it and I'm the teacher, so. And so those are some ways to deal with student pushback. As much as you can, tell your students why you're doing what you're doing. Give them opportunities to actually give you feedback, both positive and negative. Don't take it personally and just say thank you, and really try to analyze the feedback. Do they have a point, and is it just your ego that's keeping you from wanting to change? Or is there a good reason for you to continue doing the things that you're doing? And then communicate that to them. This isn't perfect and won't work every time, but hopefully it'll help in some of the situations where you're dealing with student pushback. Thank you so much for watching. My name is Thom Gibson, and if you'd like to stay in the loop with any upcoming videos focused on education, it's going to be classroom tips like this, as well as episodes of the Thom Gibson Podcast, which are NPR-like stories from the classroom, and other teaching reflections. Go ahead and subscribe. If you liked this video, go ahead and give it a like. It'll help other teachers find videos like this when they're searching for teaching tips. And thank you so much for watching. I'm Thom Gibson. I hope you learned something today, and hopefully I'll see you in the next video.